There are moments in human history when the world seems to hold its breath, when the noise of conflict, division, and fear grows so loud that even the soul feels shaken. We are living in such a moment now. News feeds flicker with images of war-torn cities, families fleeing their homes, and endless faces filled with worry. It is as though the earth itself trembles beneath the weight of human sorrow. And yet, amid this storm of chaos, there is a whisper, gentle, constant, and luminous, rising from millions of hearts across the world, the prayer of the Rosary in quiet rooms and candlelit chapels. In bustling cities and warfront trenches, the same sacred rhythm echoes. Hail Mary, full of grace. The words, so ancient and familiar, move through the air like a lifeline. They carry with them centuries of faith. The memory of generations who believed that heaven listens, that Mary, Mother of Mercy, bends close to the cries of her children. It is easy to look at the world and feel powerless. Nations clash. Families fracture. Anxiety gnaws at even the most faithful heart. But the Rosary offers something profoundly countercultural, peace that begins within. Long before it transforms the world, it transforms the soul. Before it calms nations, it calms hearts. To pray the Rosary is to step into a sacred rhythm of peace, not the fragile peace of a ceasefire, but the deep divine peace that surpasses understanding. Each bead becomes a breath, each decade a movement of surrender. It is the Church breathing with Mary, the faithful turning their gaze away from fear and toward the light of her Son. Those who pray the Rosary for peace understand something that the restless world often forgets. True peace is not achieved through might, but through mercy. It begins not in conference rooms or treaties, but in living rooms, hospital wards, in battlefield trenches, wherever a person chooses to fold their hands and whisper heavenward. Let us travel. Then, through the unseen network of souls who lift their voices daily for peace, the mothers and fathers, the soldiers and saints, the children and the dying, from the ashes of war to the silence of monasteries, from crowded cities to remote mountain villages, their stories form a great tapestry of hope. Woven together by the beads of the Rosary, the origins of this movement are as mysterious as grace itself. No campaign, no advertisement, no single leader stands at its center. The Rosary's quiet revolution spreads like the light of dawn, unnoticed at first, then suddenly everywhere. A grandmother kneeling by her bedside in Manila, a soldier clutching his rosary in Ukraine, a family praying for their children in Sao Paulo, a young student walking to class with beads hidden in her pocket, whispering prayers between breaths. Each one is a spark, each prayer a flame of peace. Together, they form a living ocean of light rising toward heaven. When Mary appeared at Fatima in 1917, she spoke these timeless words: "Pray the Rosary every day for peace in the world and for the end of the war." Francisco and Jacinta could hardly imagine that their humble prayer would one day encircle the earth. Yet her promise was true. If enough hearts turn toward God through the Rosary, peace will come. That promise did not end in Fatima. It breathes through the generations, echoing still, from the Second World War to today's conflicts. Men and women have clung to their rosaries as to a shield, a weapon not of destruction, but of divine defense. Soldiers have carried them into battle. Prisoners have carved them from scraps of wood. Children have worn them like armor around their necks. The power of the Rosary lies not in the beads themselves, but in the love they awaken, a love that disarms hatred, forgives enemies, and restores humanity to its true dignity. When the Hail Mary is repeated again and again, it becomes a song that rises above the roar of guns, a melody of mercy that softens the hardest hearts. So tonight, as the world spins in its restless cycle of headlines and fears, imagine this: millions of unseen souls kneeling in silence, holding the same ancient prayer in their hands. Some pray in grand cathedrals, others in the dark corners of refugee camps. Some are young, some are old, some are well, some are broken, but all are united in one cry: peace in heaven. This sound must be like incense, the fragrance of trust rising to our God, mingled with the tears of those who still believe. And Mary, who once cradled the Prince of Peace in her arms, continues her maternal mission to lead her children bead by bead. Closer to the heart of her Son, this is where our journey begins, not with politics or power, but with prayer. Not with the noise of the world, but with the silence of faith. As the candles flicker and the beads slip through trembling fingers, heaven leans close once more. For even in the darkest night of the world, the rosary glows like a chain of stars, and through it, the light of peace will come. The first story unfolds not in a church or monastery, but in the mud and noise of a battlefield. The year was recent, not some distant war of history books, but one of our own time. One we scroll past every day on screens and news feeds. Her name was Alina, a nurse serving in a mobile medical unit. The air around her was thick with smoke and the dull thunder of artillery. The cries of the wounded blended with the sharp commands of soldiers, and the constant fear that each minute could be her last. In that chaos, Alina carried a small object in her pocket, a simple brown wooden rosary, smooth from years of use. It had once belonged to her grandmother, who had prayed it every evening in their quiet kitchen. As a child, Alina had often fallen asleep to the sound of her grandmother's whispered Hail Marys, never imagining that one day she would cling to the same beads while kneeling beside a dying soldier. That night, as sirens wailed and distant explosions shook the earth, Alina's hands trembled over the rosary. Around her, the wounded moaned softly, and she whispered the decades like a lullaby. She prayed not only for their bodies, but for their souls, for mercy, for forgiveness. For peace, the rhythm of the beads steadied her heartbeat. The repetition, so often misunderstood as mechanical, became her anchor. Hail Mary, full of grace. Each word was a step away from fear, a breath toward the divine. The sound of bombs grew faint in her mind. What filled the silence instead was a warmth, the strange, quiet conviction that she was not alone. At one point, a soldier grabbed her wrist, his eyes clouded with pain. "Are you praying?" he asked through shallow breaths. She nodded, barely able to speak. He smiled weakly. "Don't stop," she didn't. Hours passed, and with each Ave Maria, the room seemed to soften. Even those who did not share her faith felt something shift, a calmness, a presence that could not be named but could be felt. The soldiers began to murmur their own prayers, in different languages, in broken whispers. The rosary had crossed every barrier, creed, fear, despair, and become a bridge. Later that week, a shell struck close to their camp. Dust filled the air, and debris scattered everywhere. When Alina opened her eyes, she found herself alive, miraculously untouched. The rosary had snapped in two, the beads scattered across the ground like seeds. She gathered them up one by one, tears mingling with dirt. It was then she remembered something her grandmother had once said. "When the rosary breaks, it means heaven has heard your prayer." Alina believed that. She still does. She sent a letter home days later, writing, "I have seen horror beyond words, yet I have also seen peace that the world cannot explain. The rosary has become my heartbeat. Each beat a promise that no matter how dark this world becomes." Mary walks among us still when she returned home months later. Her hair touched with gray and her eyes forever changed. She spoke little about the war, but in her small apartment, she rebuilt the rosary. She tied the threads with new cord and kept it beside her bed. Every evening, she prays it again, for the living, for the dead, for peace that endures. Those who have met her describe her as radiant, not because her life is free from pain, but because she carries the peace she once prayed for. She has become a living echo of that battlefield moment. A quiet witness to the power of prayer in the heart of suffering. Her story is not unique. Across the world, millions like Alina cling to their rosaries in hospitals, shelters, and bombed-out homes. They are the quiet warriors of peace, those who fight not with hatred, but with faith. And perhaps that is the greatest paradox of all, that in the heart of violence, the most powerful weapon is one of gentleness. The rosary, after all, was never meant only for the peaceful. It was meant for the wounded, the weary, and the frightened. Those who have seen too much of the world's cruelty find, in its rhythm, the one sound that still brings order from chaos. St. John Paul II once said, "The Rosary, though apparently simple, is a prayer of great depth. In it, we relive the mysteries of Christ's peace." And that is what Alina discovered, that peace does not mean the absence of war. It means the presence of Christ in the midst of it. It is not a silence born of surrender, but of surrendering to love. In every age, from Fatima to Ukraine, from Hiroshima to Rwanda, the same truth has emerged. When humanity has no more words, Mary gives us hers. Hail Mary, full of grace. When fear robs us of strength, the Rosary restores it. When hatred blinds us, the Rosary opens our eyes. When despair whispers that the world is lost, the Rosary reminds us that God still reigns. So tonight, somewhere in the world, another nurse kneels beside another bed, and once again, amid the cries of war and the hum of machines, a prayer begins to rise. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. The beads gleam faintly in the dim light, like tiny stars against the darkness, and heaven once again leans close. He was known among his brothers in arms as the Unshakable One. His name was David. A seasoned soldier hardened by years of combat, he had learned to survive on instinct, quick, precise, unfeeling. For him, faith was a relic of childhood, long buried beneath the noise of war. But even the strongest walls can crack, and his began to crumble the night a young civilian boy died in his arms. The boy could not have been more than 12. He had been caught between crossfire, a life cut short in an instant. David carried him to safety, too late to save him. And when he looked down at the child's still face, something inside him shattered. That night, he could not sleep. He sat alone by the flickering light of a small camp lantern, the sound of distant gunfire echoing in the hills, and for the first time in years, he wept. The next morning, as the unit prepared to move out, an elderly chaplain noticed him sitting apart. Quietly, the chaplain sat beside him and offered no words, only a small black rosary. David stared at it, confused. "I don't pray," he said flatly. The chaplain smiled, his eyes tired but kind. "That's all right," he answered softly. "Just hold it." So he did. For days, the rosary remained in his pocket, untouched, until one night, when the silence of the desert became unbearable. The stars above were sharp and infinite, and the wind carried a low, mournful hum. He took the beads out and let them rest in his calloused palm. The first words felt foreign, Hail Mary, full of grace, but as he whispered them, something stirred. The rhythm, the gentle repetition, was like learning to breathe again. Each bead became a heartbeat. Each prayer, a release. One night a firefight erupted without warning. David dove for cover, clutching the rosary instinctively. A blast tore through the darkness, and in the smoke, he saw one of his comrades lying wounded. Crawling through debris, he reached him, whispering the Hail Marys under his breath. When the dust settled, they were both alive. The soldier's wounds were real, but not fatal. Later, when they regrouped, the man said, "I saw you praying. I thought I was gone, but then I felt calm, like someone else was there with us." David didn't answer, but he knew. He had felt it too. Weeks turned into months. His hands, once so used to gripping a rifle, now reached for the rosary each dawn. Before missions, after the chaos, during the rare moments of quiet, he began praying not just for safety, but for mercy, for his comrades, for his enemies, the souls of those who never returned home. The battlefield had not changed, but he had. He began to see faces, not targets, to hear stories, not orders. The rosary had reshaped his heart, transforming the hardened soldier into a man of compassion. The weapon that once gave him power could no longer satisfy him. The beads that now rested in his hand gave him peace instead. When his service ended, David returned home. The world was different, or perhaps it was he who had changed. At first, he struggled to fit back into ordinary life. The noise of crowds, the silence of his small apartment, the ghosts that visited in dreams. But every night, he would take out that same black rosary, worn now from countless prayers, and begin again. Hail Mary, full of grace. Neighbors began to notice him walking each evening near the town chapel, always with the beads in hand. Some thought it odd, a soldier praying like a monk. But those who spoke with him learned that his calm was not born of ignorance, but of survival. "You can't fight evil with anger," he told one of them. "Only with grace. I've seen what hate can do. But when you pray the rosary, it disarms you, and somehow the world too." Years later, David would visit schools and parishes, sharing his story not of war, but of peace. He spoke of how the rosary had saved him, not from death, but from despair. How Mary had found him in the dust and the blood, and led him back to the light. He often ended his talks with the same simple line, "I was trained to destroy, but the rosary taught me how to heal." And as he said those words, he would raise the same black rosary, its crucifix gleaming softly in the light. Somewhere, perhaps even now, other soldiers pray as he once did in barracks, trenches, and makeshift chapels under open skies. They do not all share the same flag or tongue, but their fingers move over the same beads. And though the world remains restless, the prayer of millions continues to rise like incense toward heaven. Hail Mary, full of grace. The rosary has become for them not a symbol of escape, but of endurance, a quiet rebellion against fear. Because peace, true peace, is not forged by treaties alone. It is born in hearts that choose to love instead of hate, to pray instead of curse, to forgive instead of fight. And so, under the watchful gaze of the Mother of God, the soldier's rosary continues its work unseen, uncelebrated, but unstoppable. There are moments in history when it seems that the world itself holds its breath, when the weight of sorrow is too heavy for words, and all that remains is the sigh of a prayer. From the ashes of war-torn cities to the quiet corners of rural chapels, one prayer, simple, rhythmic, ancient, continues to echo across the earth. The rosary, it begins in whispers. A mother kneeling beside a hospital bed, her fingers trembling as she clutches the beads. A priest praying alone in the ruins of a church. A child reciting the Hail Mary beside a candle lit for peace. And then, from every nation and tongue, those whispers become a chorus. In Fatima, where the Virgin Mary once appeared to 3 shepherd children in 1917, millions gather each year under the vast Portuguese sky. Candles flicker like stars as pilgrims from every continent process with rosaries in hand. Their voices rise in unison. Ave Maria Gratia Plena, a plea and a promise to the Queen of Peace. Among them walks an elderly woman from Poland who lost her husband in the war, a young man from Nigeria who fled violence in his village, and a family from Ukraine carrying a photograph of their son still missing at the front. Different faces, same prayer, different wounds, same hope. The rosary has become the world's heartbeat for peace, pulsing quietly beneath the chaos of headlines and politics. Unseen but alive in the Philippines, thousands gather at dawn along coastal shores, kneeling barefoot in the sand, their voices mingling with the sound of waves. They pray for an end to corruption, for healing of families, for safety from storms, both literal and spiritual. The beads move through their hands like the rhythm of the tide faithful. Eternal in Nigeria, despite the shadow of persecution. Catholics and Protestants alike gather in secret to pray the rosary by candlelight. Each hail Mary becomes an act of defiance, not against a people, but against despair. It is dangerous, yes, but they pray anyway, because they have learned that peace is not the absence of suffering. It is the victory of love in the midst of it. In South Korea, young students form nightly rosary circles in university chapels, praying for reunification of their divided peninsula. In Mexico, entire neighborhoods pause each evening at 6 o'clock to pray aloud together. The bells of the parish church marking the beginning of another communal rosary, and in small towns across Europe. Old men who once fought on opposite sides now sit side by side before the Blessed Sacrament, beads in hand. The years have softened their anger. Only prayer remains. It is easy to overlook this quiet army of peace. They do not march. They do not shout. They do not demand. They simply pray. And yet, history remembers moments when their prayer changed the course of nations. In Austria, after World War II, a massive public rosary campaign began, hundreds of thousands praying daily for the withdrawal of occupying forces. Against all odds, it happened peacefully. Historians called it coincidence. The faithful called it a miracle in Brazil. During a time of political unrest in the 1960s, over 600,000 women marched through the streets of São Paulo with rosaries raised high, praying for peace and freedom. Not a single act of violence occurred. The movement was later called the Revolution of the Rosaries. And in Fatima, in 1984, Pope John Paul II, the man who survived an assassination attempt on the feast of Our Lady of Fatima, consecrated the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. He said afterward, "The Rosary is my favorite prayer, a marvelous prayer that brings peace to hearts, to families, and to nations." Today, the world once again trembles under the shadow of conflict. Wars that scar nations and hearts alike, but the same prayer continues. In refugee camps, in hospital wards, in cathedrals, and in the living rooms of the elderly who can no longer kneel but still whisper every bead. Technology has changed everything, and yet, paradoxically, it has amplified the sound of prayer. Live-streamed rosaries connect thousands across continents. Online prayer chains unite the young and the old in real time. From Manila to Madrid, from Nairobi to New York, the rhythm of Hail Mary weaves its invisible thread through the digital noise of the modern world. And what does this prayer achieve? Some might ask, can beads and whispered words truly stop wars? The faithful answer? Yes, because they stop the war within. Peace does not begin in treaties or governments, but in hearts transformed by grace. The Rosary changes people, and changed people change the world. When a father forgives, when a mother hopes, when a soldier lays down hate, when a child learns to pray, peace has already begun. Every rosary is a seed of peace sown in soil that may not yet see its fruit, but heaven sees it. Mary gathers each prayer like a pearl and offers it before her Son, the Prince of Peace, and so, every night, as the world darkens, somewhere, always somewhere, a rosary begins. And though it may seem small, heaven leans in close. For as long as one soul continues to whisper the Hail Mary with love, peace is not lost. Because peace is not an event, it is a person, and through the rosary, we draw closer to Him, Jesus Christ, born of Mary. The light that still shines in the darkness. Night falls softly over the world, somewhere in a hospital ward. A nurse pauses beside a flickering vigil lamp and touches the beads hidden in her pocket. Somewhere in a prison cell, a man traces the crucifix at the end of his rosary with trembling fingers, and somewhere, maybe in your own home, a single candle burns beside. A small image of the Virgin Mary, its flame dancing gently in the silence. This is how peace begins, not with the noise of speeches or the shaking of hands between leaders, but in the quiet surrender of hearts that dare to trust again, in that hush, that sacred stillness between prayers. The soul learns to breathe differently. When the Blessed Mother appeared at Fatima, her message was simple yet world-shaking. Pray the Rosary every day for peace in the world and the end of the war. It wasn't a political strategy. It wasn't a call to protest. It was a call to love, to arm the world. Not with weapons, but with faith. She knew that peace could not be imposed. It must be invited through grace, through prayer. Through hearts united with her Son, each bead of the Rosary is like a seed of peace sown into the soil of human suffering sometimes. The soil is dry, the tears are many, and the night feels endless. But Mary walks those fields with us. She bends down beside us and whispers, "Do not be afraid. my son is with you. And somehow, the heart that was breaking begins to heal. Countless souls can testify that the Rosary does more than bring calm, it brings conversion. A veteran haunted by the memory of war finds peace in the repetitive rhythm of prayer. A widow who buried her only child learns to hope again as she contemplates the sorrowful mysteries. A teenager, restless and anxious in the chaos of the digital world, feels peace for the first time as she listens to her grandmother's soft voice reciting Hail Mary, full of grace. Each of these souls discovers the same truth. The Rosary is not merely a devotion, it is an embrace. It is Mary taking your trembling hand into hers, guiding you to her Son, the source of all peace. The world hungers for peace, but it searches in all the wrong places, in wealth, in power, in distraction. Yet peace cannot be bought or built, it must be received, and the Rosary opens the door to receive it. In each decade, we meditate on the mysteries of Christ's life, his birth, his suffering, his resurrection, and as the prayer unfolds, something mysterious happens. Our own lives begin to mirror his. We find the strength to forgive. We learn to love beyond fear. We begin to see suffering not as defeat, but as participation in the redeeming love of God. That is why millions pray the Rosary. For peace, not because it changes the world from the outside in, but because it changes us from the inside out, and changed hearts can heal nations. Imagine it for a moment. If every soul who prays the Rosary tonight offered one Hail Mary for peace, for forgiveness between enemies, for healing in broken nations, the sound would rise like incense before heaven. What if that sound never stopped? What if, as one Rosary ended in Manila, another began in Madrid, and another in Nairobi, and another in New York, a global chain of light encircling the earth? Would not heaven smile upon such love? Would not Mary, Queen of Peace, once again extend her mantle over the world? In the end, the Rosary is not simply a prayer for peace. It is peace, spoken bead by bead. Heart by heart, it is peace in the mother who forgives her son, peace in the soldier, who learns to pray instead of hate, peace in the dying who surrender their fear to God, peace in you. If you dare to trust her promise, Mary does not promise a life without storms, but she does promise that those who cling to the Rosary will never be lost in the dark, for where she is, there is peace, and where there is peace, there is Christ. So tonight, as you put down your phone or close your eyes to rest, take up your Rosary. Hold it as if you are holding the hand of the mother who stands beside you. Begin with one prayer. Just one, and in that simple act, you are joining a chorus that has never ceased. The heartbeat of humanity turned toward heaven. When you whisper, Hail Mary, full of grace, you are whispering with millions across oceans, across time, across every wound the world has ever known, and heaven hears, because every Rosary, prayed in love, is an act of peace. A candle lit in the darkness, a hand extended in forgiveness, soul lifted toward God. The wars of men may rage, but the Rosary builds a kingdom that cannot be destroyed. It's the kingdom of peace that begins in the heart and ends in eternity. So let us pray again, as Mary asked, and as her Son longs to hear, O my Jesus, forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell, lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of thy mercy. May this prayer rise like morning light upon a weary world. May every bead be a heartbeat of peace, and may you, dear listener, become part of this holy chain of grace until the whole earth is encircled, not by fear or division, but by the radiant love of God through the hands of his mother.